Yo, what's up everybody? Today I want to talk about one of the best Sorcerer builds for leveling in Diablo 4 Season 9, and it is an Incinerate build. Now, Season 9 is looking like the season of nerfs. Lots of the best builds and the best abilities in the game have been nerfed this season. However, Sorcerer is holding strong. In fact, this build has been significantly buffed. So we have seen massive buffs to Hydra and massive buffs to Incinerate, both in its damage and the amount it can ramp up the longer you cast it. So not only is this going to be one of the fastest and strongest ways to level, this is one of the easiest builds. It's easy to build out, it's easy to play, and it's looking like it will build into one of the best endgame builds, which is going to be Hydra. We got a new unique for Sorcerer this season, which is all about the Hydra. You get these giant hydras, and it looks great. So if you level with this, get a few of the legendary affixes along the way, then when you do hit endgame and the torments, you're in a great place to move over to one of the big endgame Hydra builds. So how does it play? It plays so smooth and so easy. So all you do is you drop out hydras and they do a ton of damage, and then you do your incinerate and you just melt everything on the screen. Now, some extra things here is whenever you drop a hydra, you also trigger your familiar. So by dropping a companion, your familiar enchant will also summon a familiar, which is another damage increase. And then every 8 seconds, you will summon a serpent, which will additionally cast incinerate. So it's very passive, it's very smooth, and there's really not that much complexity to it. So you can just get this going from the start with minimal aspects and just steamroll to endgame. Okay, so let's get into the build, starting with the skill tree. From the top, 2 points into Fireball. This is just so we can unlock our next section, our core skills. In our core skills, we want to take 5 points in Incinerate. This is our main source of damage. We want to put 1 point into Enhanced and 1 point into Greater. Every 3 seconds, an enemy has been hit by Incinerate, they're immobilized, which helps with, survivability and triggers some other things later on. In our defensives, we want to take quite a few things here. We want to take Flame and Ice, 1 point into Flame for burn radius, and 1 point into Enhanced for mana regen, and then 1 point into Shimmering so that you reduce your cooldowns. Then we want to put 1 point into Teleport, 1 into Enhanced, and 1 into Shimmering for damage reduction. That's good because when you teleport into a pack of mobs to start your rotation, you get the damage reduction instantly, which just works really, really well, especially while leveling if your armor's not great. You want to take 3 points into Glass Cannon, 24% more damage is huge. Okay, then coming down to the next section, we want to take 5 points into Hydra. Again, Hydra has huge damage this season. 1 point into Enhanced, which gives you an extra head on the Hydra for more duration. And then you want to take Roaring. Also burns enemies for 100% of its damage over 6 seconds. Now, there are potentially reasons why this would be better, but critical striking while leveling, we're not really spec'd into anything, we don't really have like the gear to give us the really high crit chance, so I think this will work out better. Okay, then we only take 1 point in Familiar because we're not taking Familiar for its damage. We want to take it for this. You enhance it, and then you want to take Invoked. While you have an active Familiar, you deal 10% increased damage of its elemental type. Now, when we drop a Hydra, we have a chance to auto summon a Familiar. It's not even on our bar, this is completely passive. And then when we do summon the Familiar, we get 10% fire damage increase, which is really nice. Over here, we can take 3 points into Primordial Binding, which gives us summon damage, movement speed, and mana regen, and I believe this is getting buffed in Season 9. Then we take 1 point into Enlign the Elements and 3 points into Protection. Using a cooldown gives you a barrier. Now, there are lots of things that scale well with having a barrier on Sorcerer. There are aspects you'll find that like increase your damage if you have a barrier, things like that, and it's just good defensives. In the next section, we want to take pretty much all of these little fire buffs, except for this one. 2 out of 3 this gets lucky hit, and our chance to proc a lucky hit is not like huge. So I would go for 2 out of 3 there. Then we come down into the next section. 5 out of 5 your Inferno. Now, it's not just the damage here, like you can see that the damage increases, but if you 5 out of 5 it, the cooldown comes down. So that just means we can cast it faster. It sucks all the enemies in, makes them vulnerable, so that when you throw out your Incinerates, you're just melting them. You want to put 1 point into this to pull enemies in, and 1 point into this. Reduces all of your pyromancy skills, 50% increased damage, and costs no mana. So it's just really, really nice to have this back as fast as possible. Then I would take everything here. You've got increased mana regen. You come down into here and you've got less mana and deal increased damage. Then you've got you deal increased burning damage. And then down here, you've got healing while enemies are burning. I 2 out of 3 this just because we're short on points. Then over here, 3 out of 3 this. You deal more damage for each type of that skill you have on your bar. And we have quite a few fire skills, so that's a good damage boost. 3 out of 3 this for cooldown reduction. The main things we're trying to reduce the cooldowns on is, of course, our ultimate. Teleport is really good for mobility. And then, if you're fighting anything like bosses, elites, having your defensives on cooldown is great as well. Then finally, Combustion. Your burning effects deal 60% increased damage, and an additional 25% of your burning damage and damage to burning enemy bonuses. So that's just a flat, easy, big damage boost. Now there has been some changes and some, this has been significantly buffed coming into season 9, and this may work out better, but as of right now, I'm going to say combustion. Once we get in and we test it along with the core abilities, the new powers, this might be much better. So try it if you want to try it, but this is a safe bet. This is going to be a significantly good damage boost, but this may pull ahead. I'll check it. I'll write in the comments this video if it turns out to be true. So yeah, that's the build. Okay, now let's talk about enchantments. So there are 2 that pull ahead here, and let's talk about them. So you have a few options here. While leveling, your options would be, I would say, Fireball can be quite good because it gives you a good AoE, but you have to put a few points into Fireball to really make the most of that. There are things like Hydra, which, after spending a certain amount of mana, you'll summon a Hydra, which is a good damage boost. But the 2 that I really like for this build that I've used in the past would be Familiar. So every time you scroll down here, you can see each time you summon a conjuration that isn't a familiar, you have a 33% chance to summon a familiar of the same element. Now, this isn't tied to crit or lucky hit. It's just a 33% flat chance. So for every, 3 hydras you summon, you'll summon a familiar. These familiars hang around for a fair while. And on top of that, they give you a damage boost. They give you a 10% damage boost to your fire spells. So it's just a good thing to have. And then on the incinerate enchantment, I'd go for every 6 seconds, a serpent spawns and incinerates enemies for 8 seconds. So that way, anything that you get on your aspects or in your trio, that's like when an enemy is incinerated, it will trigger from this. So you get a double incinerate. You get an extra friend casting incinerate. So this works really, really well. These are the 2 I would recommend. And that's what I'd run in this build. Okay, so now let's talk about the aspects that we want to be looking for while we level and the ones we want to be putting on our gear. And then some of the other things we can do to increase our damage while leveling. So here is the build guide. So this is going to be linked down below. This is going to have everything that you need, the skill tree, the abilities, the aspects, everything you need is going to be on here, the new powers, everything's on here. So if you want to go check that out, it's down below. But this is a good place to look at the gear because it's just all laid out really well. So let's go through it. Okay, so let's talk through them in kind of the big priority ones. First, you want to be getting the aspect of conflagration because you can get it by completing Light Swatch in Fractured Peaks. So if you hover over the item, you can see where it comes from. And if there's nothing next to it, it means that it's a legendary aspect that you have to find the aspect in the game and salvage it. So it's harder to find. But if it has the name, you can just go to the dungeon early on and get this early. So get a 2-handed staff, put conflagration on it, and when you upgrade your staff, put conflagration on the new staff. So this increases your burning damage by 40%, and enemies damaged by incinerate will then blow, burning all surrounding enemies over 6 seconds. This is massive damage. Then flamethrower's aspect on your amulet. The reason we say that is if you put something on a 2-handed weapon, if you're new to Diablo 4, if you put the aspect on a 2-handed weapon, it's a 200% boost on the stats of the aspect. If you put it on an amulet, it is a 50% additional boost. So these 2 are your most important slots. So on the aspect, I would go for Flamethrower. Incinerator splits into 3 beams, each dealing up to 90% of normal damage. This is just really good. It kind of turns it from like a long range, like laser, into an up close. If you can hit them with all 3 beams, you do incredible amounts of damage. So this is really good to get. It's RNG. If you find this while leveling, it's a good boost. If you don't find it, it is what it is. Okay. Aspect of overheating on rings. After channel incinerate for 2 seconds, it deals up to 100% increased damage for 5 seconds. And then aspect of the 3 cursors. Now, the tooltip hasn't been updated here because this has just come out in yesterday's patch notes, but if I drag this in here, you can see here the aspect of 3 cursors has actually changed. So the new changed aspect of 3 cursors is increases crit damage of pyromancy skills by 45%, doubled against healthy targets. So this is massive, so I'll be looking for that. Before, this only works with Meteor and Fireball. Now it's all fire skills. So big W here, really going to be great in this build. Okay, then let's go through the rest. Wild Bolt, distant enemies are pulled in and take increased damage. We go for Disobedience, increased armor. We go for Engulfing Flames. You deal 9% increased burning damage to enemies for each second they remain burning, up to 45% after 5 seconds. Additionally, you deal increased burning damage to enemies that are not healthy. So this works really well with, ones where it's like if they are healthy, you've got the counter side to that. We go for Concentration, casting a Conjuration skill, it gives you damage reduction. And then finally, this one here, 20% movement speed, lose it if you get hit. Just a nice little overall speed boost. That's what I'd be looking for. Now, on a leveling build, I don't normally like to talk about, you want to find items with, crit and lucky hit. And I don't like to go into that too much because you're just going to be putting on the highest item level gear you can find and replacing it in a couple of levels. However, if you do want to temper your gear, this is what you should be looking for. On your weapon, chance for incinerate to deal double damage is massive, and then offensive fire damage is pretty good too. If you don't find this weapon temper out in the game while you're leveling, there is one that says chance for hydras to spawn an extra head, I believe. So you could go for that one instead. That works pretty well with this build. And then you can also get utility, increased incinerate size. This is really good because it just means we can be more carefree with our incinerate and we can catch more monsters in it. So that's good if you can get that wherever you can get it. And then if you just want to throw on your like damage, fire damage, crit chance, things like that, they all work great too. But yeah, that's the build. Okay, now let's talk about the Season 9 spells, the Horadric Spells, the powers. So we don't know fully the extent of how these are going to work or how easy they're going to be to get while leveling, because the season is, as of recording this, it's not even out yet, so we don't know how easy it will be to get these. But the way they work is you pick a spell, and there are 5 spells, and then you pick an ability, like, for example, Hydra, and then the spell will cast on the ability. So, for example, when you summon, for example, the way this set works, when you summon a Hydra, you will summon a Celestial Surge on an 11-second cooldown. That's kind of the basics. And then these things here change how these spells work. So yeah, this is all assumptions. We don't know if we can get this. This might not, we're not going to get this until end game, but assuming it's possible, I'm going to talk about it. And then if, when I get in and we play it, if it turns out, you only have access to this spell until end game, I'll change this accordingly. But this is what I'd suggest based on what I've tried. Hydra as the ability and Celestial Surge as the spell. So awaken a rune that pulls in all surrounding enemies and then follows them, doing 1,280% damage is what this one says here. That's based on the rank. And then stars will fall, dealing damage. So this is just a huge damage boost, and it sucks enemies in, lining them up for incinerate. Now on the things we detach, smoldering, your catalyst now deals fire or burning damage. It also destroys enemy structures and ignites the ground beneath, dealing huge amounts of burning damage over 5 seconds. This is really, really good, and it scales with our fire bonus. So this is amazing. We can go for siphoning. So damage from your catalyst has an 80% chance to consume damage over time effects and deal their damage instantly. We can go for sapping. Your catalyst applies vulnerable because we don't really have many ways to apply vulnerable in this build. And then we go reactive. Gain 20% max resource per second for the next 10 seconds. Just because it's a leveling build, we're not on top of our resource regeneration. Yeah, that's what I would do. And I'll change this as I play if this doesn't feel doable while leveling. If these are hard to get or something, I'll change it as we get in. Okay, now lastly, let's talk about the Paragon Board. So I don't want to go too hard on the Paragon Board because this is a leveling build, and you will move over to an end game build with like uniques and a final version ready to take on the high torments. However, while you're leveling, you might find this still works really well in early torment, and you might want to play it for a bit longer. So I wanted to make not only a Paragon Board that can get you going, but one that will transition really well into an end game fire build, like a Hydra build, which I'm going to be making, and I will attach it to the to this planner as well, so you can jump over to that when you get there. So this is how I would start it out. Run it down the middle, go both sides, then come up to the center and grab Pyromaniac. This gives you increased damage. You cast increases every pyromancy skill you cast, or every second you channel incinerate, you gain damage increase. This is just flat damage increase. Get it in, then grab enough nodes along the side, do 25 willpower, grab enough nodes to tick that off, move up to the next board. On the next board, I would go Burning Instinct. I would spin it so you can grab this first. Burning Instinct, your burning damage is increased by 20% of your damage with fire bonus, plus 2% for every 30 int you have. By the time you get to, by the time you unlock your Paragon Board, you'll have a lot of this, so this is just huge. Then you want to come up the middle, grab these nodes here for crit strike damage and burning damage, and then come along here and grab Flame Feeder. For every 5 decks, you deal increased damage to burning targets. Now, everything we do will burn the targets, so this is going to be just huge damage. So you want to grab all of these nodes to, get more decks. I got like 69, nice. So let's move over. Next section, Searing Heat. It's a pattern, they're all flame and heat. Searing Heat, then you want to grab here, Torch. For every 5 willpower, you deal increased burning damage, and you deal increased damage per nearby burning enemy. Really, really good. So grab loads of nodes here, and then right along down here and get this Searing Heat. Pyromancy skills have a 12% increased crit strike chance, and all of your skills deal increased damage equal to your crit strike damage bonus. And as we already spoke, Crit Strike just works really well in this build because it also goes along with the 3 curses aspect, which is huge. Okay, then I would come along here and I would grab the Elemental Summoner because I say we're going to be moving towards, I think as we get to endgame, I would say the more endgame meta fire things are Firewall and Hydra. Incinerate's good, but it does fall off a little bit as we start pushing higher. So you probably want to transition to a Firewall or a Hydra build. I'm going to be making a Hydra build because I think that's going to be stronger. Based on, what I've tested, I think Hydra's going to be best with this new unique. So I would go for the Elemental Summoner Conjurer board. So go up here and grab the Conjurer glyph. Every 5 within range, Conjuration skills deal increased damage, and Conjuration has increased crit chance. And then grab the Elemental Summoner node. Your Conjurations have reduced cooldown or mana cost, and they deal bonus damage equal to your total amount of bonus damage, up to 60%. That's how I'd be setting this up. By the time you've got, 4 boards and all these nodes, you'll either be on an endgame build or you'll be so far ahead that you'll probably understand what you're doing anyway. So I haven't gone any further than this. We still got 100 points to play with, 120 points, but this is more than enough to get you going for the first few days of, season 9. And I think that's everything. That's all there is to really talk about. This is a leveling build. Let's not talk it too much. I think we're done. Everything else is on here. I've not talked about it, but here's some runes you can look for, some gems you can put in. But I don't know how much people really do while leveling. I just sort of slap the skill tree together, throw some aspects on, and just level to max level before I even look at anything else. But it's here if you want to do it. But that's it. Thank you for watching. If, like I say, you want to see the Hydra build or you want to see more leveling builds, I'm going to be releasing a bunch. So subscribe for more. Thank you for watching. Take care. Enjoy season 9, and I'll catch you in the next one.